I'd always called Houston home, the kind of sprawling beast of a city that swallowed you whole if you let it. Born and raised in the shadow of the ship channel, where the refineries belched smoke like eternal dragons, I'd spent 20 years fighting fires in this humid hellhole. As a firefighter with Station 42 on the east side, I knew every pothole in the gridlock, every flood-prone underpass after a storm. Houston wasn't just a job, it was in my blood, thick as the Gulf Coast air that clung to your skin even at dawn. That morning started like any other shift end. The alarm had quieted hours ago, leaving the station house smelling of stale coffee and diesel exhaust. I wiped the sweat from my forehead with the back of my glove, the fabric rough against my stubbled jaw. My boots echoed on the concrete floor as I grabbed my duffel from the locker room, muscles aching from a night of false alarms, car wrecks in the rain-slicked streets, a grease fire at a taqueria downtown. The clock read 7:15 a.m., and all I wanted was a cold shower in my apartment off Westheimer, maybe a nap before the heat climbed to triple digits. Outside, the sun was already a hammer, turning the parking lot into a shimmering haze. I slung my bag into the truck bed of my old F-150, the metal hot under my palms. The engine grumbled to life, AC blasting lukewarm air that did little to cut the humidity. Traffic on I-10 was the usual snarl, semis from the port weaving like they owned the road. I flicked on the radio, scanning for news while inching forward. Static crackled, then a voice cut in, some morning show host with that fake cheer. "Folks, stay hydrated out there. Temps hitting 95 by noon, and we've got reports of unusual activity at the hospitals. Ben Taub and Memorial Hermann are swamped with flu cases, they say. Drink water, y'all." Unusual activity. I snorted, merging onto the feeder road. Houston summers brought every bug and fever under the sun. We'd pulled overdoses and heat strokes from the bayous more times than I could count. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from my neighbor, Maria, about the building's AC acting up again. Our high-rise on the edge of the Galleria was a concrete monolith. 20 stories of overpriced units crammed with transplants and oil execs. I'd moved in 5 years back after my divorce, drawn by the view of the skyline at night. Lights piercing the perpetual haze like distant fires I couldn't reach. The radio switched to traffic, but the updates felt off. Accidents piling up on 59. Ambulances backed up near the medical center. I glanced at the dashboard clock. Another 20 minutes to my exit. Billboards for crawfish boils and Astros games blurred past, a reminder that life here pulsed with grit and grease. My stomach growled, thinking of the breakfast tacos waiting in the fridge. But as I crested the overpass, brake lights flared ahead like a chain reaction. Horns blared, a symphony of impatience. I eased off the gas, peering through the windshield smeared with bug guts. Down below on the access road, a crowd milled near a wrecked sedan. Not the usual fender-bender rubberneckers. People were shouting, phones held high, filming something. A woman in scrubs stumbled out from the car, her face pale, eyes wild. She clutched her arm, blood seeping through her fingers. The driver, a burly guy in a hard hat, backed away, hands up like he was surrendering to ghosts. I pulled over, hazard lights flashing. Instinct kicked in. You don't ignore bleeding in this city. Grabbing my first aid kit from behind the seat, I jogged down the embankment, the gravel crunching under my boots. The air down here was thicker, laced with exhaust and something sharper. Sweat. Maybe fear. "Hey, ma'am, you okay? Let me take a look." She turned and my breath caught. Her eyes weren't just wild. They were vacant, pupils blown wide. Veins stood out like black rivers on her neck. Before I could react, she lunged, teeth snapping inches from my forearm. I shoved her back hard, the force sending her sprawling into the ditch. Her hard hat guy wasn't faring better. 2 others from the crowd had him pinned, but no, they were attacking him, nails raking his face. Screams erupted, raw and animal. This wasn't a mugging or road rage. The way she moved, jerky and relentless, like the fire that doesn't yield to water. I'd seen Burns victims in shock, but this, frothing at the mouth, ignoring the pain as she scrambled up again. My heart pounded, a drum in my chest. Radio chatter from my truck drifted down. Reports of violent incidents citywide. Stay indoors. Houston PD advising avoidance of medical center. I backed toward the overpass, kit forgotten in the dirt. The crowd was fracturing now, some fleeing, others piling on. One of the attackers broke free, shambling after a runner, collapsing on him with a wet snarl. Blood sprayed the asphalt, dark and glistening in the sun. This was infection, spreading like spilled oil on the bayou. Not flu, not heat stroke. An outbreak, right here in the veins of Houston. I sprinted back to the truck, slamming the door as tires screeched nearby. Engine roaring, I punched the gas, weaving through the chaos. My building, our building, was 10 minutes away, but the roads were turning into kill zones. Maria's text burned in my mind. If they were locking down high-rises, I had to get there. The skyline loomed ahead, towers that once promised safety now looking like traps waiting to snap shut. Houston had floods and hurricanes. But this? This was the fire I couldn't put out. The traffic clotted worse than I-10 after a hurricane evacuation. I gripped the wheel, knuckles whitening against the cracked leather, as my F-150 crawled forward in the sweltering heat. The AC wheezed, pushing out air that smelled of recycled sweat and faint diesel from the idling semis ahead. Houston's sprawl stretched out like a fever dream, endless strips of fast food joints and strip malls baking under the relentless sun, their signs flickering with promises of normalcy that felt like lies now. Sirens wailed in the distance, layered over the honks and revving engines, a cacophony that set my teeth on edge. I scanned the mirrors, spotting a cop car weaving through the mess on the shoulder, lights flashing red and blue against the haze. My radio, still tuned to the emergency band, spat fragments of chatter. Multiple assaults at the Galleria. Avoid Westheimer. Harris County, declaring state of emergency. The voice cracked with static, but the words hit like embers on dry grass. The Galleria, that upscale maze of shops where my building sat on the fringe, was ground zero for the panic now. A jolt rocked the truck as someone rear-ended me lightly, the bumper kiss sending my heart slamming against my ribs. I glanced back. A minivan, doors flung open, a family spilling out. The dad yelling into his phone while the mom clutched a kid to her chest. "Move!" I barked through the open window. But he just stared, eyes glassy with shock. No time for this. I gunned the engine, swerving into a gap that opened when a pickup veered off into the ditch. Its driver slumped over the wheel, unmoving. The underpass loomed ahead, shadows cool and deceptive in the midday glare. Graffiti-tagged pillars rose like forgotten sentinels, and the air grew thicker with the tang of standing water from last week's rain. Houston's bayous never fully drained, always waiting to swallow the unwary. As I plunged into the dimness, brake lights illuminated the chaos. Cars abandoned mid-lane, doors ajar, personal effects scattered like confetti from hell. A woman's purse lay burst open, lipstick and wallet spilling across the asphalt, overlooked in the stampede. Something thudded against my tailgate. I jerked the rear view, figures scrambling over the bed of my truck. 2 men in torn work shirts, faces smeared with blood and grime. One clawed at the window, nails scraping glass with a screech that drowned the radio. His eyes locked on mine, not pleading but hungry, pupils dilated to black pits, mouth working soundlessly. Infected. No doubt now. I floored it, the truck lurching forward as tires spun on debris. They tumbled off with guttural snarls, rolling into the path of the car behind me. A crunch followed, then screams. Sweat trickled down my back, soaking my shirt under the turnout jacket I'd thrown on out of habit. 20 years at Station 42, I'd faced infernos that warped steel, but this spread faster than any blaze, unpredictable as Gulf winds. My building was just 2 miles out, past the overpriced boutiques and the eternal construction on Westheimer. But the road ahead bottlenecked at a pileup, 3 vehicles mangled against a guardrail, steam hissing from radiators like escaping souls. People fled on foot, some dragging suitcases, others empty-handed and wild-eyed. I yanked the wheel right, bouncing onto the grassy median, the suspension groaning in protest. Mud sucked at the tires, a reminder of how Houston's soil turned to soup in the humidity. A woman waved me down from the shoulder, mid-30s, yoga pants and a tank top, hair matted with sweat. "Please, my husband's back there. He's hurt." Her voice cracked, hands fluttering like trapped birds. I slammed to a stop, engine idling rough. Firefighter instinct overrode everything. We didn't leave people in the heat. "Where?" I asked, grabbing my kit again, the weight familiar in my palm. She pointed to the wreck. A sedan crumpled nose first into a concrete barrier. He swerved to miss. "Those things! Help him!" The air hummed with distant rotors, maybe a news chopper or medevac circling the medical center. I approached low, scanning for movement. The driver's door hung open, and inside, a man groaned, blood streaking his face from a gash on his forehead. But as I leaned in, his head snapped up, teeth bared in a rictus grin. Not pain, rage. He lunged, fingers grazing my arm before I recoiled, stumbling back into the woman. "Run!" I shouted, but she froze, staring as he spilled out, shambling toward us with that unnatural jerk. I didn't hesitate, shoved her toward my truck, then swung the kit like a club, connecting with his shoulder. The impact jarred my wrist, but he barely staggered, veins pulsing black under sweat-slick skin. We piled into the cab, her slamming the door as I peeled out, mud flying. "What the hell is happening?" she gasped, breath hitching. "Outbreak," I said flatly, eyes on the road. "Infected. Stay low." Her name was Elena, she blurted. Lived a few blocks over, heading to pick up her kid from daycare when the pileup happened. Houston's traffic had trapped her. Now it was trapping everyone. The skyline sharpened as we crested the rise, the Galleria's glass facade glinting like a mirage. My building stood just beyond, a sleek tower of steel and smoked windows. But even from here, I saw the anomaly. Barriers at the entrance, security milling with what looked like rifles. Lockdown. Maria's text had been the tip of it. Sirens echoed off the high-rises, and smoke curled from a distant plume, maybe a crash or worse. Elena's hands trembled on her knees. "My son, daycare's near Post Oak. I have to get him." I nodded, jaw tight. The choice gnawed. Drop her and bolt to my unit, secure my own gear, or detour into the thickening nightmare. Houston's grid was a web of one-ways and floods. One wrong turn and we'd be boxed in. But leaving her meant another life on my conscience, like the calls we couldn't reach during Harvey. "We'll try," I said, voice steady despite the doubt. "But if it goes south, you follow my lead." As we merged back onto the feeder, a herd of infected spilled from a side street, dozens, shambling from the direction of the parks, drawn by the noise. They flooded the lanes, a wave of ragged clothes and guttural moans. My pulse thundered, the truck's engine roaring as I accelerated, clipping a mailbox in the evade. Elena screamed, but I kept my eyes forward. The building's promise of lockdown felt like a false dawn. Safety, maybe, but at what cost? Houston was unraveling, thread by humid thread, and I was racing the fray. The herd closed in like floodwaters after a downpour, their moans blending with the truck's straining engine. I swerved hard left onto a side street off Westheimer, the F-150's tires biting into the asphalt slick with morning dew and spilled oil. Palm trees whipped past, fronds scraping the roof like frantic fingers. Elena clutched the door handle, her knuckles pale against the worn plastic, breath coming in sharp bursts that fogged the window. We barreled through a residential stretch, manicured lawns giving way to chain-link fences sagging under the weight of abandoned bikes and toys. The sun baked everything, turning the air inside the cab into a sauna. Sweat beaded on my forehead, stinging my eyes as I scanned for an opening. Post Oak was close, maybe a mile, but Houston's veins were clotting fast. Every alley looked like a potential dead end. A low growl rumbled from the radio, cutting through the static. Evacuations failing at the medical center. Infected overwhelming barricades in Midtown. All units, fall back to the ship channel perimeter. The voice belonged to some dispatcher I'd probably crossed paths with at joint trainings, now sounding frayed as old hose. Midtown, that was east of us, but the ripple was hitting everywhere. If they were pulling back to the industrial sprawl where I'd cut my teeth at Station 42, Houston's core was lost. I killed the radio, the sudden silence heavier than the humidity pressing on my chest. Elena shifted, her yoga top clinging damply. "The daycare, it's just off San Felipe. Turn right up here." Her voice was steady now, edged with that desperate calm I'd seen in fire victims clinging to routine. The turn came too sharp. The truck fishtailed, rear end clipping a parked SUV with a metallic crunch that echoed off the stucco walls of the bungalows. Infected heads snapped toward the noise. A dozen shamblers peeling off from the main pack behind us. their footsteps an uneven shuffle on the sidewalk. One, a woman in a nurse's scrubs, badge still pinned crooked, lunged at a fleeing jogger, tackling him into the grass with a thud that vibrated through the ground. Heat clawed at my throat, the kind that sapped your strength before you even swung an axe. 20 years hauling gear through infernos, and I'd never felt the burn like this, not from flames, but from the weight of choices piling on. Elena's kid was out there, probably finger painting or napping, oblivious to the world turning feral. Drop her off and peel out to my building, secure the lockdown myself, bolt the doors, and hunker with whatever canned goods I'd stashed, or stick it out, play hero in a city that chewed them up. Firefighters didn't run from the blaze, we charged in. But this fire was alive, spreading with teeth. We hit San Felipe, the street a ghost of its upscale self, coffee shops with shattered windows, outdoor tables overturned like dominoes. The daycare squatted at the end of the block, a low brick building with cartoon murals peeling in the sun, playground swings swaying empty in the breeze. No cars in the lot, just a single yellow bus tilted against the fence, its door hanging open like a scream. Elena was out before I stopped, bolting toward the entrance with a cry that twisted my gut. I killed the engine, grabbing the pry bar from under the seat. Better than nothing against teeth. The air outside hit like a wet blanket, thick with the scent of jasmine from overgrown yards and something fouler underneath, like meat left too long in the Gulf heat. My boots pounded the pavement, pulse sinking with the distant thump of helicopter blades circling the Galleria. "Wait!" I hissed, catching her arm just as she yanked the door. It didn't budge, chained from inside, a handwritten sign flapping. "Quarantine. Do not enter." Her face crumpled, fists hammering the glass. "Tommy." "It's Mommy." No answer, just the echo of her voice bouncing off the murals of smiling animals now smeared with handprints. A snarl cut the air from the playground side. 3 infected burst from behind the slide. Toddlers' playmates turned monsters, clothes torn, faces slack and snarling. One, a man in a delivery uniform, charged straight at us, arms outstretched, veins like oil slicks under his skin. I stepped forward, pry bar raised, the metal cool and solid in my grip despite the sweat slicking my palms. Elena screamed, backing against the wall. I swung low, connecting with his knee, a crack like splitting wood, the kind I'd heard in collapsing beams. He crumpled but kept crawling, fingers digging into the gravel. The other 2 flanked, drawn by the noise, their moans rising like smoke signals. My arms burned from the effort, lungs pulling in air that tasted of dust and fear. Houston's heat amplified everything. It turned fights into endurance tests, sapping you faster than any hose drag. "Get to the truck!" I yelled, jabbing at the second one, a woman with graying hair, once maybe a grandma dropping off cookies. The bar glanced off her shoulder. She barely flinched, lunging with nails raking air. Elena bolted, fumbling the door as I retreated, the third infected clipping my calf with a glancing bite that tore through denim but not skin. Thank God for thick fabric. Pain flared hot, but adrenaline shoved it down. We peeled out, the daycare shrinking in the mirror. Elena sobbing quietly beside me. He was there. I know he was. Her words hung heavy, a weight I couldn't lift. I'd chosen to help, delayed my run to the building, and now her kid was locked in with whatever hell had started inside. Consequence hit like backlash from a nozzle. My delay meant her delay, and Houston didn't forgive split seconds. The road to my high-rise curved through the upscale drag of post oak, boutiques with mannequins staring blankly from shattered displays. Smoke plumed from a crashed delivery van ahead, flames licking the undercarriage. A small inferno I itched to fight but couldn't. Sirens wailed closer now, layered with gunshots popping like fireworks gone wrong. My building's silhouette rose against the hazy sky, barriers glinting in the sun, lockdown in full swing, security lights strobing like a beacon in the chaos. But as we approached, a crowd surged at the entrance, residents pounding gates, infected mingling in the fray, turning the plaza into a churn of bodies. My haven, the concrete fortress I'd trusted after every shift, was fracturing. Elena wiped her eyes, steeling herself. "What now?" I gripped the wheel tighter, the pry bar across my lap like a promise. Dive in or circle for a back way. The choice clawed deeper, Houston's sprawl mocking us with its endless options and traps. The first hours were bleeding into noon, and survival felt like wrestling smoke, slippery, choking, impossible to contain. The crowd at the building's entrance surged like a flash flood in a dry creek bed, bodies pressing against the wrought iron gates that I'd always thought too flimsy for real trouble. My F-150 idled at the curb, engine rumbling low to avoid drawing more eyes, the heat from the hood radiating up like an open oven door. Elena leaned forward, her breath fogging the dash as we took in the scene. Residents I'd nodded to in the lobby, oil roughnecks in faded Astros caps, a yoga instructor type clutching a designer purse, now shouting and shoving while shadows twisted among them, infected slipping through like oil slicks. I cut the engine, the sudden quiet amplifying the chaos, fists banging metal, a woman's wail cutting sharp over the din, the distant pop of what might have been gunfire from the Galleria side. Pry bar in hand, I popped the door, motioning Elena to stay put. "Lock it behind me. If I don't wave you in, drive. Head for the underpass tunnels." She nodded, eyes wide but resolute, her fingers already twisting the key. The air outside slapped me, thick and soupy, carrying the acrid tang of smoke from that van fire we'd skirted. I wove through parked cars, using hoods for cover, the asphalt scorching through my boot soles even at midday. Houston's sun turned everything into a pressure cooker. Sweat soaked my collar, vision blurring at the edges from the salt sting. The gates rattled under assault. A burly security guard, Rico from the night shifts, barking orders into a radio that spat only static. Closer now, the mix revealed itself. Half the crowd desperate to get in, the other half already turning. Bites hidden under sleeves or collars, eyes glazing over in the humid glare. One infected, a kid no older than Elena's Tommy in a school polo, latched onto a man's leg, teeth sinking with a wet rip that echoed off the glass lobby doors. The victim howled, kicking futilely as blood welled dark on the pavement, the scent hitting me like overripe fruit left in the Gulf heat. Rico spotted me through the bars, his face slick with sweat under the brim of his cap, veins standing out on his neck from the strain. "Martinez, you cleared? Building's on lockdown. Management's orders. No one's in or out till PD sorts this shit." His voice cracked, hand hovering near his holster, the weight of it pulling his belt low. I gripped the bars, the metal hot and unyielding under my palms, scanning the plaza beyond. Potted palms toppled, their fronds crushed underfoot, emergency lights strobing red through the smoked glass like false heartbeats. 20 years in Houston fires, I'd breached worse. Hoses through flames, axes into infernos. But this lockdown was self-inflicted, neighbors turning on each other faster than a grass fire in drought. Elena's face flashed in my mind, her kid locked away. If I pushed Rico, convinced him to crack the gate, it might save her shot at regrouping inside. But one slip, one bitten slipping through, and the whole tower became a tomb, my unit on the 14th floor just another layer of the pyre. Firefighters triaged. Save the structure or the souls inside. I'd left calls burning during Harvey, structures lost to save lives. Now the lives were the fire, spreading unchecked. Rico's eyes darted to the crowd, doubt flickering. He knew me from poker nights in the basement gym, trusted my call on extractions. But opening meant risking his job, his skin, everything in a city that rewarded caution over heroics. The infected kid detached, shambling toward us, his small frame jerking with unnatural hunger, drawing moans from others in the throng. Choice hit like a backdraft. Force the gate and own the breach, or circle for the service alley. Leave the crowd to fracture without me. Rico hesitated, keyring jangling in his fist. "Damn it, Martinez. You vouch for that woman in your truck?" "She's clean," I said, voice low, nodding toward the F-150 where Elena's silhouette hunched low. "Kids out there too. Daycare on San Felipe. We get in, we hold till this blows over." He cursed under his breath, Spanish slipping in like old habit, then jammed a key into the lock. The gate swung inward with a groan, the crowd surging forward in a wave of outstretched hands. I braced, pry bar ready, shoving back the first rush, two infected tumbling into the ornamental bushes, their snarls muffled by leaves. Elena gunned the truck through the gap, tires chirping on tile as Rico slammed the gate shut, chain rattling into place. We bolted for the lobby doors, the glass cool against my shoulder as I shouldered them open, cool air blasting out like a lie of safety. Elevators dinged in the distance, but stairs were the play, no boxes for ambush. Footsteps pounded behind us, residents piling in, some clutching pets or bags, eyes wild with the street's echo. My building, this concrete spire off Westheimer, had weathered storms and blackouts, but Houston's pulse was outside, hammering to get in. Up 2 flights, breath burning in my chest, we hit the resident lounge. Couches overturned, vending machines shattered, the flat screen flickering emergency alerts. Outbreak confirmed in Harris County. Avoid contact. National Guard en route to Port of Houston. Elena collapsed against the wall, gasping, while I wedged a chair under the door handle. The heat from below seeped up, a reminder that lockdown bought time, not victory. My unit waited higher, gear stashed, but the tower groaned with new weight, infected moans filtering through vents like smoke signals. Rico's radio crackled again. Breach at the east gate. Fall back to the roof. A thud shook the floor from the stairwell below, heavy, deliberate. They were inside. The thud reverberated through the lounge like a dropped oxygen tank, vibrating up my legs and into my spine. I froze, pry bar mid-swing toward the door, the metal humming faintly in my grip from the earlier scuffle. Elena whipped around, her back pressing harder against the vending machine wreckage, shards of glass crunching under her sneakers. The air in here was stale, cooler than outside, but laced with the metallic tang of fear sweat and spilled soda from the shattered cooler. Distant shouts filtered up the stairwell, muffled pleas turning to gurgles, while the flat screen's glow cast erratic shadows across the upended furniture, emergency ticker scrolling. Shelter in place. Infected detected in uptown sector. Rico bolted the lounge door behind us, his bulk blocking the frame as he panted. Radio clipped to his belt, crackling unanswered. That came from the garage levels. Elevators must have been compromised. Residents piling in from the underground parking, thinking it's safer. His eyes darted to the ceiling, sweat carving tracks down his stubbled cheeks, the weight of his holster pulling at his shirt. We barricaded fast, my firefighter training kicking in like muscle memory, dragged the couch against the door, wedged the lounge table's legs into the frame, stacked chairs like sandbags. Houston high-rises were built for hurricanes, not hordes. Concrete bones strong, but the veins of stairs and vents were vulnerabilities, easy paths for the spread. Elena helped where she could, her hands shaking as she shoved a potted ficus into the gap, soil spilling dark across the carpet. The thud repeated, closer now, accompanied by a scraping drag that set my teeth on edge, like nails on rebar during a structure collapse. I wiped my brow, the cool air doing little to cut the rising heat from our exertion, my shirt clinging like a second skin. 20 years at Station 42, I'd triaged infernos in the ship channel refineries, deciding which tanks to vent first, which crews to pull back when the flashover loomed. Down there in the garage, it was the same math. Infected breaching from below meant the lobby was lost, the stairwells turning into chimneys for the smoke of screams. Rico wanted to hold here, radio for backup from the super's office on 5. Elena whispered about scouting the roof for a helipad evac, her voice cracking on her son's name. But my gut screamed upward. My unit on 14 had the go bag, the fire axe, the reinforced door I'd installed after Harvey's floods turned basements into tombs. Stay and fight the breach, risk the lounge becoming a kill box. Or climb, abandon Rico to guard the door while we slipped away, leaving him to the drag of those footsteps. Firefighters didn't leave brothers in the burn. Rico had cracked the gate on my word, his trust a debt I couldn't default on now. The scraping grew insistent, inches from the door, a low moan seeping through like gas from a cracked line. Stairs to the east, I said, voice low, nodding toward the service door at the far end of the lounge. Rico hefted his sidearm, a Glock that looked heavy in his meaty hand, checking the mag with a practiced click. I'll cover. You two go. Get to your floor, Martinez. I'll hold till the guard rolls in from the port. Elena shot me a look, pleading and fierce, her fingers twisting the hem of her tank top. No words needed. Her kid's face haunted her eyes. a mirror to the moral burn I'd felt leaving calls unanswered in past storms. We moved as a unit, me leading with the pry bar, Rico sweeping the hall beyond the service door, empty fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like dying wasps, the carpet muffling our steps. The stairwell door creaked open on oiled hinges, releasing a rush of warmer air from below, thick with the sour edge of unwashed bodies and something rotting, faint but unmistakable in the confined space. We ascended in silence, boots soft on the treads, my breath steady but shallow, ears straining over the hum of the building's AC vents. Houston's towers were pressure cookers in crisis. Heat rose with the panic, turning safe havens into saunas that sapped your fight. At the third-floor landing, a shadow flickered below, elongated, jerking, followed by a guttural rasp that echoed up the concrete shaft. They were climbing, drawn by our noise, the infection turning the stairs into a funnel for the flood. Halfway to 7, my calf throbbed from the earlier graze, a dull pulse that warned of fatigue setting in, muscles tightening like overpressurized hoses. Elena stumbled once, catching herself on the rail, her gasp too loud in the echo. Rico paused, signaling halt, his free hand pressing to his side where a dark stain bloomed under his shirt. Must have caught a rake in the gate rush, hidden it to keep us moving. "Keep going," he grunted, waving us up, but his face paled, sweat sheening unnatural. "Bitten?" The veins on his neck looked too prominent, pulse visible like a ticking fuse. Tell Elena? Get her clear before he turned? Or push on, trust his grit, risk her in the close quarters if he snapped? Down in the ship channel blazes, we'd dragged wounded brothers through flames, bought them time till medics arrived. Rico was one of us now, lockdown forging the bond. But this wasn't burn shock. It was the Outbreak's curse, irreversible as a total structure loss. The rasp below swelled, multiple now, a chorus climbing in our wake. We hit the 10th landing, lungs burning from the climb. The air growing thinner with altitude but no less humid. Windows fogging from the outer heat bleeding in. Rico sagged against the wall, breath ragged, hand clutching his side tighter. "Go. I'll slow him." Elena reached for him, but I pulled her back. The pry bar heavy in my arm, decision crystallizing like water to ice in a freeze-off. "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "We all go. Lean on me." He nodded, grim, and we pressed on, his weight dragging like dead hose, the building's core groaning around us. Houston's skyline mocked through the slit windows, towers standing sentinel. But from here, my home felt like a besieged outpost, the lockdown a thin line against the tide. The rasps gained, a stair below, and Rico's grip slipped, his moan too much like theirs. Consequence clawed in. I'd chosen solidarity, but if he turned mid-flight, it had cost us the tower, Elena's chance to regroup, my own fragile perch. The heat pressed harder, exhaustion coiling in my gut like smoke inhalation, blurring the line between ally and threat. By 12, Rico's steps faltered, knees buckling on the landing. Elena helped hoist him, her face set in determination, but I saw the flicker, doubt mirroring my own. The infected's moans filled the shaft now, a wave cresting, the thud of their ascent shaking dust from the railings. My unit was 2 floors up, door promising bolt and board up, but carrying him meant seconds lost, exposure in the open. Firefighter's oath or survival's edge. Houston had taught me both, in floods that drowned the weak and fires that forged the rest. I shouldered his arm higher, ignoring the burn in my shoulders. The first real creep of desperation, as options narrowed to this shaft, this choice, this building unraveling floor by floor. Rico's weight dragged heavier with each step, his arm slung over my shoulder like a felled beam after a collapse. The stairwell air thickened, humid breaths mingling with the faint rot seeping up from below, turning the climb into a slog through Gulf Coast fog. We pushed past the 13th landing, my boots scraping the concrete treads, the pry bar tucked under my armpit to free a hand for the rail. Elena flanked Rico's other side, her face flushed and slick, small grunts escaping as she bore his lean. The infected's moans swelled behind us, a ragged chorus echoing off the walls, closer than the last floor. 20, maybe 30 seconds if they didn't stumble. Houston's high-rises were vertical mazes, designed for flow, not sieges. Every door we passed hung ajar, shadows flickering in the gaps like embers waiting to ignite. A door banged open 2 flights down, the crash reverberating up the shaft. Rico jerked, his breath hitching into a wheeze that sounded too wet. I halted at 14, sweat stinging my eyes. The hallway beyond the door a dim stretch of carpeted neutrality under emergency strips. My unit, 1407, waited at the end, door plain but solid, the one I'd reinforced with deadbolts after seeing too many garage floods swallow cars whole. Elena scanned the hall, her chest heaving, while Rico sagged against the wall, his free hand pressing harder into his side, blood seeping through fingers now black-tipped. Almost, I muttered, fishing keys from my pocket with trembling hands, the metal slick. The moans crested, bodies thudding against the landing below, fingernails scraping railings like sparks on flint. Elena's eyes met mine, wide with the math we'd all run. Rico's pallor, the glaze creeping into his stare, veins threading darker under his collar. Bitten in the gate rush, no doubt, hidden to keep us moving. A brother's silence costing us speed. 20 years at Station 42, I'd pulled men from the ship channel fumes, watched shock turn to surrender. But this was no smoke inhalation. It was the infection's fuse, burning fast in Houston's heat. We burst into the hall, Rico stumbling between us, his boots shuffling uneven. The air here was cooler, AC humming faint through vents, carrying the faint jasmine from my neighbor's balcony pots, normalcy mocking the chaos outside. I jammed the key, twisting hard, the lock clicking like a lifeline. Door swung in, and we piled through, Elena slamming it shut while I flipped the deadbolts, the steel rod sliding home with satisfying thuds. Barricade next. The hall table dragged in from the entry, legs wedged under the knob, my go-bag yanked from the closet to pile on top. Cans, water, the fire axe I'd kept from an old call. Rico collapsed onto the couch, the leather creaking under him, his face ashen against the beige cushions. The apartment smelled of yesterday's coffee and the faint ozone from the storm windows overlooking Westheimer's snarl below. Cars abandoned, distant sirens wailing like Houston's eternal storm warning. Elena knelt beside him, peeling back his shirt to reveal the gash. Ragged, inflamed black lines spidering outward like oil spills in the bayou. "It's bad," she whispered, voice cracking, her hands hovering useless. I leaned against the counter, pry bar down but axe in reach, chest heaving as the adrenaline ebbed into a bone-deep ache. The building groaned around us, vibrations humming through the floor from the stairwell assault. Fists or worse pounding doors below, the lockdown fracturing floor by floor. Rico's choice to crack the gate had bought us entry, but his wound was the bill coming due. If he turned here, in this 800-square-foot sanctuary, it'd end us all. Firefighters lived by the code. No man left behind. Drag the injured through hell to the medics. But medics were ghosts now. Hospitals like Ben Taub overrun per the radio snippets. Leave him restrained in the bathroom, zip tied to the pipes like a hazmat spill, or end it quick. Spare the pain. Spare Elena and me the fight in tight quarters. Houston had drowned families in Harvey's floods, forced calls on who to hoist first, structures lost, lives prioritized. Rico's eyes met mine, knowing, a nod faint but clear. He'd made his stand at the gate. Now it was mine. "It's spreading," he rasped, voice thick, sweat beading on his brow like dew in the humid dusk filtering through blinds. "Don't hesitate." Elena recoiled, tears streaking her face, but she nodded once, fierce. "Do what you have to. For Tommy. For all of us still out there." Her words hung, a tether to the world beyond the glass, where the Galleria's lights flickered erratic against the hazy sky, smoke columns rising from midtown like signals of total loss. I gripped the axe, the hickory handle worn smooth from drills, heart pounding a rhythm I'd felt in every structure fire. No time for debate. The door rattled faintly, a test from below. "Forgive me, brother," I said, raising it high. The swing connected clean, a mercy thud that echoed in my skull louder than any siren. Rico slumped still, the cost immediate. Blood on the carpet, a life traded for our seconds. Elena turned away, dry heaving into the sink, while I wiped the blade on a towel. hands steady but soul-fracturing like rebar in the heat. We moved fast after, securing the unit. Windows taped against shatter. Balcony door chained, radio tuned low to the emergency band. National Guard securing the ship channel. Infected herds reported in the heights. Houston under curfew. Stay barricaded. The voice faded to static, but the words sank in. My old station's turf holding the line, but the city pulsing with the outbreak's fever. Exhaustion clawed now, legs like lead from the climb, the humid air pressing as the sun dipped, turning the room into a dim oven. Elena curled on the floor by the couch, eyes distant, the weight of her lost son mirroring my fresh ghost. A new thud shook the outer wall, not stairs, but the service elevator at Hall's End, doors groaning open with a whine. Footsteps shuffled out, multiple, heading our way. The building's lockdown was a sieve, and our fragile haven teetered. Houston's sprawl had always been too big to hold. Now it was turning inward, devouring its own. I hefted the axe again, resolve hardening like concrete in the Gulf heat. Survive the night, then find a way out. For Elena, for the kid, for the city I'd fought to save. But the shuffles grew. Enrico's blood cooled on the floor, a reminder that every choice carved deeper into the bone. The shuffles in the hall multiplied, a slow drag of feet on carpet that vibrated through the floor like the first tremors of a refinery quake. I gripped the axe tighter, the wood slick under my palm from drying sweat, positioning myself by the door as Elena scrambled up from the floor, her eyes red-rimmed but sharp. We backed into the kitchenette, the counter at our spines a makeshift barrier of granite and forgotten mail. The apartment's air hung heavy, the AC struggling against the outer heat bleeding through the walls, carrying faint echoes of moans from the vents below. Houston's summer nights turned buildings into sweatboxes. Even at dusk, the humidity clawed in, turning every breath labored. A low thud tested the door, the frame creaking under pressure. Not a battering ram, more like bodies piling, testing seams like heat checking a weak beam. Elena clutched a kitchen knife from the block, her knuckles white, breath shallow and ragged. The radio on the counter hissed static, then a fragment. Uptown sector compromised. Avoid elevators. Infected converging on high rises. Uptown, that was us. The Galleria Fringe, where the outbreak had rooted in the medical center and spread like spilled crude from the ship channel. I scanned the room, mind racing through egress points. Balcony overlooked a 15-story drop to Westheimer's snarl. Fire escape rusted from disuse, but viable for descent. 20 years at Station 42, I'd repelled from worse. Blazing rooftops in the industrial east. Lines taut against Gulf winds. But with Elena, no harness, just improvised rope from bedsheets and belts. Or hold the door, fight room to room until the guard punched through from the port. The thuds persisted, rhythmic now, like a heartbeat gone wrong. Enrico's body cooled on the couch, a stain spreading slow across the leather. His mercy kill weighed on me, the axe's heft a reminder. I'd chosen quick over quarantine, spared us a turn in the night, but the silence it bought felt stolen, fragile as Houston fog. Elena whispered, "We can't stay. They're inside the walls." Her voice cracked, knife trembling, but her stance held. Mother's steel, forged in the city's endless grind. I nodded, slinging the go-bag over my shoulder, the weight of water bottles and flares grounding me. Fire escape, tie off and drop to 12, safer than fighting up here. No time for debate. The door buckled inward a fraction, wood splintering with a sharp crack that echoed my fracturing resolve. We moved, me dragging sheets from the bedroom, knotting them hasty around the balcony rail, the metal hot from the dying sun. Dusk painted the skyline orange, smoke plumes twisting from Midtown like signals from lost calls, the distant wail of sirens mocking our isolation. The first breach came as I tested the line. Door frame splintered, an arm thrusting through, fingers clawing air with blackened nails. Elena gasped, slashing wild. The knife connected, a wet slice that drew a snarl, but more hands followed, infected piling in a tangle of limbs and hunger. Their eyes locked on us, vacant pits reflecting the room's dim light, veins like Houston's cracked freeways under skin. I swung the axe one-handed, severing the arm at the elbow with a thunk that jarred my shoulder. blood spraying dark and sticky across the threshold. The body slumped, but the gap widened, moans spilling in like floodwater through a breached levee. "Go!" I barked, shoving Elena toward the balcony. She looped the sheet around her waist, swinging over the rail with a grunt, her descent a controlled slide that frayed the fabric audibly. The drop to the next balcony was 10 feet, then repeat, fire escape ladders dangling like lifelines in the humid breeze. I followed, axe belted to my side, the knot holding as I rappelled down, boots scraping stucco, heart slamming against ribs from the effort. Below, Westheimer churned, abandoned cars smoldering, figures shambling between palms, the Galleria's lights flickering like a power grid on the brink. Houston's sprawl had always felt endless. Now it was a labyrinth closing in, high-rises turning from homes to hives. We hit the 12th floor balcony, Elena yanking the sliding door, unlocked, abandoned in the panic. Inside, the unit was a tomb. Overturned lamps, blood smears on the carpet leading to the bedroom, air thick with the copper tang of recent violence. No bodies, just the echo of flight. We barricaded quick, couch against the glass, then slipped into the hall, the building's core humming with distant crashes, elevators grinding to halts, vents rattling with trapped moans. Exhaustion hit mid-stride, my legs buckling like overtaxed struts, each step a deliberate push against the lead in my veins. The humid dusk pressed heavier now, sweat soaking through my shirt, vision tunneling from the day's toll. The overpass lunge, the daycare abort, Rico's end. Firefighters trained for 12-hour shifts in infernos. But this was no drill. Scarcity gnawed, water low in the bag, no station resupply waiting at shift's end. Elena leaned on the wall, breath hitching, her knife hand drooping. "We need out. The tunnels under the Galleria, service access. I know a way from deliveries." The hall stretched dim under backup lights, doors ajar like invitations to traps. A child's cry pierced from Unit 1205, faint but raw, pulling at Elena's face like a hook. Her son. No, impossible. Daycare blocks away, but the sound mirrored her loss. A ghost in the concrete. Push onto the stairs, hit the garage for wheels, aim for the ship channel perimeter where the guard held. Or breach the door. Risk the delay for one life in a building devouring its own. Call back to the choice at San Felipe where I'd left her kid behind. Houston's floods had taught triage. Save the many by sacrificing the few, but the cry clawed deeper, exhaustion blurring the math into moral fog. I hesitated, axe raised to the lock. The shuffles from above resumed. Descending now, a herd flushing down the tower's veins. Elena's eyes pleaded, knife forgotten. "Please." The cry peaked, then cut to a gurgle. Too late. Choice locked. One door, one life, or the escape narrowing with every second. I swung, wood cracking under the blade, the building's groan swallowing the sound as night fully claimed the skyline outside. Houston wasn't just burning, it was bleeding out, floor by floor, and we were running out of walls to hide behind. The axe bit into the door frame with a splintering crack, wood fibers parting like overtaxed cabling in a blaze. I yanked it free, the blade catching faint light from the hall's emergency strips, then swung again, the impact jarring up my arms to my shoulders. Elena shoved past as the door sagged inward, her knife raised, breath hissing through clenched teeth. The unit beyond was a shadowed wreck. Furniture toppled in the entry, a child's backpack spilled across the tile, crayons rolling like spent casings. The air rushed out cool and stale, undercut by the sharp copper of blood and something sweeter, like spilled juice fermenting in the humid trap of the room. The cry cut off sharp, replaced by a gurgle that twisted my gut. We crept in low, boots silent on the debris, my axe leading like a Halligan bar through smoke. The living room opened to chaos. Couch cushions shredded, a flat screen shattered against the wall, its cords dangling like severed lines. Houston's dusk filtered through half-drawn blinds, casting long shadows across the carpet stained dark in patches. Elena's eyes darted to every corner, her face a mask of desperate hope, knife trembling but forward. A small form huddled behind the overturned coffee table, a girl, no more than 5, curls matted with grime, clutching a stuffed bear to her chest. Her eyes widened at us, not vacant like the infected, but terrified, tears carving tracks down dust-streaked cheeks. "Mommy?" She whimpered, voice tiny against the building's distant groans. Elena dropped to her knees, knife clattering aside. "It's okay, honey. We're here to help." The girl flinched but didn't bolt, her small hands twisting the bear's ear, the fabric worn soft from endless comfort. I scanned the bedroom doorway, axe ready, the hall shuffles echoing closer now. 12 feet, maybe more, flushing down from above like heat rising in a chimney chase. 20 years pulling kids from cribs during apartment fires in the East Side projects. I'd learned the math. They slowed you, added weight to every move, turned evac into a gamble. This one wasn't Elena's Tommy, but close enough in age to mirror the loss at the daycare. My delay there had cost her a shot at him, and now this echo demanded payment. Scoop her up, add her to our flight through the tunnels, risk the extra body drawing noise or slowing a sprint. Or leave her hidden, barricade the unit behind us, buy her silence till the guard swept in from the ship channel. Houston's sprawl had chewed up strays in every flood. Firefighters triaged the viable, not the vulnerable. But her eyes locked on mine, pleading like the calls we answered in the night. Enrico's ghost whispered from the floor above. No man left, even the small ones. "Name?" I asked, voice low, crouching to her level without lowering the axe. "Sophia," she whispered, glancing at the bedroom where a woman's shoe lay abandoned, heel snapped. No body, but the smear trail led there, bitten, turned, fled. The infected's moans swelled outside. A door banging open 2 units down, footsteps scattering like embers. Elena scooped her up gentle, the girl clinging tight. A soft sob muffled against her shoulder. "We can't leave her," Elena said, eyes fierce, the knife back in her free hand. No debate needed. The choice locked in, consequence immediate as the shuffles hit our hall, bodies thudding against neighboring doors. I nodded, slinging the go bag higher, the weight now shared in spirit. Tunnels. Service access off the garage level, leads under the Galleria to the storm drains. We'd hit the stairs east, drop fast, avoid the main elevators turned death traps. The building vibrated, a low rumble from the core shafts, AC vents rattling with trapped air, or worse, voices from below. We slipped out, Sophia's arms locked around Elena's neck, her bear dangling like a flag of fragile trust. The hall stretched dim, emergency lights buzzing faint, casting our shadows long and warped against the beige walls. My legs burned from the earlier climb, each step a grind against concrete fatigue, sweat trickling down my spine in the cooling dusk air, seeping through cracked seals. Houston's humidity clung even inside, turning the descent into a steam bath, breath fogging as we hit the stairwell door. The stairs waited dark, only a sliver of light from lower landings. The air thicker here with the sour reek of waste and decay rising like fumes from a spill. We descended in tight formation, me first with axe probing corners, Elena shielding Sophia's face from the gloom. Footsteps echoed our own, but multiplied. The herd from above pouring down, moans blending into a wave that chased us like backdraft chasing air. At the 8th landing, a figure lurched from a cracked door, an old man in a bathrobe, eyes milky, arms outstretched with a rasp that chilled deeper than any ship channel night. I swung low, the axe connecting with his leg in a dull crack, dropping him without a spray, but the noise boomed, drawing snarls from below. Sophia whimpered, Elena's hand clamping her mouth, gentle but firm. We vaulted the body, tread slick underfoot, my boot slipping once on congealing blood, heart slamming as I caught the rail. Exhaustion coiled tighter mid-drop around the 6th floor, my vision spotting from the strain, arms like lead pipes after a full hose advance. The girl's weight on Elena slowed us, breaths sinking in ragged pulls, the humid air tasting of metal and rot on my tongue. 24 hours ago, I'd clocked out at Station 42, thinking of tacos and sleep. Now the city I'd bled for in every blaze was a vertical inferno, floors collapsing under the weight of the turned. Rico's end upstairs haunted. His silence at the gate had saved us entry, but carrying the wounded had cost him, and now Sophia's presence echoed that debt, a callback to choosing lives over lockdown purity. We hit the garage level, the door groaning open to a cavern of shadows and echoing drips. concrete pillars looming like refinery stacks. Cars sat abandoned, doors ajar, the air cooler but laced with exhaust, and the wet earth smell of underbelly Houston, always flooding, always leaking. Service tunnels yawned at the far wall, grated doors half open, promising a burrow under the chaos to the bayou edges. But the herd crested the stairs behind, a tumble of bodies spilling out, eyes glinting in the low light. Elena bolted for the grate, Sophia bouncing in her arms, while I held the flank, axe swinging in wide arcs to buy seconds. One connected, another grazed, the impacts jarring my bones. But they pressed, a wall of hunger closing the gap. "Go!" I roared, backing toward them, the first real desperation spiking as options funneled to this dim escape. Elena yanked the grate, the girl scrambling through first on hands and knees, her bear snagging once before vanishing into the dark. The tunnel swallowed her cry, then Elena's form, leaving me last, axe hooked on a lunging shoulder to slow the surge. I dove in, pulling the grate shut with a clang that rang like a final alarm, chains rattling as I locked it. The infected clawed the mesh, faces pressing grotesque, but the barrier held, for now. We crawled into the black flashlight from the bag cutting a beam ahead, the pipe walls slick with condensation, echoes of drip sinking with our pants. Sophia whimpered soft, Elena's whispers soothing her, the trio inching toward whatever fragile haven the drains offered. Houston's underbelly had always been a secret vein, flooding in storms to swallow secrets. Now it was our thread, temporary and treacherous, the city's transformed heart beating feral above. Relief flickered brief as the claws faded behind, but hollow. Rico gone, Tommy lost, Sophia's weight a new cost in the endless night. The outbreak's first hours had stripped us bare, and the real siege was just uncoiling in the dark. The tunnel's chill seeped through my shirt, a stark bite against the day's lingering sweat. We crawled deeper, knees scraping the grated floor, flashlight beam bouncing off riveted walls slick with condensation. Sophia's small breaths echoed ahead, muffled by Elena's jacket sleeve, while the grate behind us rattled faintly. Fingers still testing, but the lock held for now. The air down here was damp, heavy with the mineral tang of standing water and old concrete. Houston's underbelly breathing slow like a beast after a binge. Drips plinked rhythmic from overhead pipes, marking time in the black. I killed the light to save battery, plunging us into void, only the faint glow from a distant junction ahead cutting the edge. Elena's whisper guided us. Left at the fork, storm drain access, leads to the bayou feeder. Her voice held steady, but I heard the tremor, the weight of Sophia on her back slowing every inch. 20 years navigating the ship channel's maze of pipes and spills, I'd learned these veins. Houston's drainage system, a web of culverts built to swallow floods, now our burrow from the surface fire. But down here, isolation gnawed different. No skyline views, just the press of earth, the echo of our own panic. Saving Sophia had bought us this path, a callback to the daycare choice where I'd delayed for Elena's plea. Now the girl's trust added drag, her soft whines pulling at threads I'd frayed upstairs with Rico's end. We'd triaged her from the hall cry, risked the breach for one life echoing Tommy's loss. But the herd's pursuit proved the cost, seconds shaved from our lead. The building's groan fading above like a structure settling after blaze. We emerged into a wider chamber, a junction where 3 tunnels converged, knee-deep water pooling in the center like spilled ink. Elena set Sophia down gentle on a dry ledge, the girl's legs folding under her, bear clutched tight as she curled into Elena's side. I scanned with the light. Rusted grates sealing side passages, a maintenance panel half open with dangling wires. The air cooler here but laced with mold and faint sewage from upstream overflows. Houston's storms had filled these spots to the ceiling during Harvey, turning them into drowning traps. Now they offered hush, the surface chaos muffled to vibrations through the stone. We hunkered, backs to the wall, passing the water bottle in silence. Sips rationed, the plastic crinkling soft in my grip. Relief washed first, a looseness in my shoulders as the adrenaline drained, breath evening out in the dim. But it soured quick, hollowing into the ache of inventory. Rico's blood on my carpet upstairs, his nod before the axe a debt unpaid. Elena's eyes distant, Tommy's absence a wound I'd helped inflict by detouring to the building first. My own unit, that 14th floor perch with its view of the haze-shrouded skyline, now a tomb in the overrun tower. Lockdown failed. The concrete spire I'd called haven twisted into a hive. Exhaustion settled deep, my back throbbing against the unyielding wall, each muscle a knot from the endless pull. The flashlight dimmed to a glow, battery whining low, so I fished the radio from the bag, twisting the dial slow. Static hissed, then snagged a signal. Emergency broadcast. The voice tinny and looped. Outbreak confirmed global night cases in New York, London, Tokyo. U.S. borders sealed. Houston's port under military cordon. No evacuations from Harris County. The words landed heavy, widening the fracture. Not just our sprawl unraveling, but the world. Threads snapping from the medical center to the Gulf and beyond. Midtown smoke plumes we'd glimpsed from the balcony. Now beacons of bombing runs, the dispatcher had hinted earlier. Government scorching herds to contain, turning the city into scorched earth. Houston, my blood-soaked home, the beast of refineries and bayous I'd fought to tame, now a ground zero marked for the pyre. I'd chosen solidarity at every turn, cracking the gate with Rico, saving Sophia over speed, but the chain pulled taut here. Elena's grief for her son sharpened by the global echo, no rescue coming for the locked daycare. My delay to help her stranding us in this vein when I could have bolted solo to the ship channel perimeter. Sophia stirred, her small hand finding mine in the dark, fingers cold and trusting. I squeezed back, the touch grounding amid the drip's steady pulse. Elena's head leaning on my shoulder in shared fatigue. The water lapped at the ledge's edge, a reminder of floods past, Houston rising to swallow the weak, forcing us survivors to adapt or sink. We'd reached this pocket, temporary as a breather between alarms, but the costs tallied. Allies lost, morals bent in the heat, the city above transformed from gritty pulse to feral grave. No full victory, just the grim stealing. Barricade deeper at dawn. Scavenge the drains for an out to the bayou's edge. Link with whatever guard held the ports. The rasps from the grate had faded, but new vibrations hummed distant. More infected flushing the system, or patrols above. My hands steadied, no longer shaking, resolve coiling like a fresh hose line. We'd clawed through the first day, the lockdown's false walls crumbling. But the real war uncoiled in the dark veins of Houston. This humid heart I'd once loved now beating with our fragile rhythm. Survival wasn't enough. It was the spark to fight the spread, one flooded step at a time.